Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the latest installment of Habitat Charlotte Region's online Learn and Ask, presented in partnership with filtersfast.com. Today, we are going to talk about local land and property trends, as well as construction strategies we are using in our new home construction program, as well as our work on preserving the current stock of affordable housing in our area. Just a couple of housekeeping things before we begin. During our talk today, you can ask a question at any time using the Q&A box, and we will answer them at the end of the presentation. We will do our best to get to all the questions, but if we can't answer them all, we will work on getting answers through social media if possible. So with that, I'll pass it over to Bob Glusenkamp and Chris Barton to introduce themselves and dive into the topic.
Great.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Alex. So I'm Bob Glusenkamp. I'm the new Vice President of Construction. Recently joined Habitat Charlotte Region the end of March. And so interestingly enough, this is the way that I've conducted business for the last 2.5 months, is by Teams meetings and Zoom meetings and pretty much via the internet. So I anxiously await getting out on the job sites and especially working with the volunteers. So pleasure to virtually meet all of you this morning, and I look forward to talking to you.
Yes, and I'm Chris Barton. For those of you that I have not met before, I have been with Habitat for about 1.5 years, a little bit over that time period, and operate in the role of Director of Land Acquisition and Development. Prior to that, I was in the industry since about 2005 in a combination of construction, real estate, and land development. So that's kind of my prior history, and interesting times that we're in right now. I think a lot of us are, learning as we go, and really trying to be sensitive and adapt, to all the changes in our environment around us. So I will say this, that I've been in this industry prior to the recession, during the recession of 2008, and after the recession. So from that standpoint, I'm familiar with the changes in markets, the changes in mode of operation, and learning how to navigate the pressures and decision making that goes along with that. So we've got a great team. So I just want to communicate that we've been resilient, strong throughout all of this process. We've got a great plan moving forward, I feel, and we're positioned well. So I just want to convey that sentiment. I've been asked this morning to kind of give just an update on some of the acquisition and development trends that we're seeing. And in doing that, Hunter, if you don't mind throwing up the slides there for me. Let's see. All right, there we go. So we'll try to keep it short and sweet here. Be mindful of everyone's time. I only have a few talking points that I wanted to just kind of address with everyone. So what are we kind of seeing right now in the market? Obviously, these are very interesting times. A lot of different factors at play. And interestingly enough, we're seeing a strong appreciation still, even through COVID. And prior to COVID, we were experiencing year over year about 6.5% appreciation in property values in the Charlotte area. Okay. Historically, what's been considered just healthy is 4% year over year. So on average, we're above average. What I will say is that in a lot of the habitat communities in neighborhoods where we have historically had a presence, we're seeing a significantly higher percentage of appreciation than even the average. And that is true for both home values and also land values. So just kind of give you some numbers, some statistics to gauge. So in many of our neighborhoods, so I've been with Habitat for 1.5 years, in many of the neighborhoods that we have been buying land in for a single lot, we've seen in many cases over 100% cost increase just in the value of the land. So for example, if we were paid $15,000 for the land a year and a half ago, now we're paying in excess of 30. And that's pretty much the norm across the board. So we're seeing that significant appreciation. Values are holding constant and even increasing right now, even through COVID, because we have a supply shortage. So a lot of folks have been timid to go to market. We were already at a supply shortage with both homes and land. And with, the current market conditions, some folks have just, decided to delay, that typical spring and summer surge that we see where folks are putting their houses on the market or, looking to make, life changes. So we are seeing, I think last I heard, this was a couple weeks ago, we're at about a 2-month supply in inventory for this is retail sales. Typically what's considered healthy is a minimum of 4 months, but ideally you want 6 months of inventory in a market. That's considered healthy. So you can kind of see the disparity there. And what that's doing is that's keeping values elevated because demand, especially in that $250,000 price point and below, is still very, very strong. So, and typically that's the zone from a value standpoint that Habitat is operating in. So you can see how that directly impacts us. We're seeing historically high values across the board. So a couple weeks ago, I read that median home values in the United States are at all-time highs. So we have since met and exceeded the pre-recession of 2008 values, which if anyone's been in the Charlotte area for some time, they remember what it was like and, the strong dip that we took in values. So we have since climbed that mountain back to the top and gone beyond. So that's kind of where we're at from a value perspective. I actually wrote down some statistics to share with you guys. So median home values in the Charlotte area now are at $230,000. That's the median value. And then the median list price. So if someone goes to market, the retail value, the median list price is $295,000. So you can see the strong trends in Charlotte. We're quickly going to sort of that 250 and above value as a median home price in Charlotte. So we're having very, very strong year-over-year appreciation. The demand is strong. A lot of our business sectors have not been impacted as hard. So demand is strong as well. So what does that look like for us? We have been and are continuing to transition to an off-market model. When you purchase retail at retail values, you're paying top dollar, obviously. And one of the contributing factors to that is because of the competition for those properties. You're going to get into a highest and best offer situation 9 times out of 10. Because anything that's sold retail has a lot of eyeballs on it, right? Everybody's looking for opportunities still. And so really what we found is to be a good move for us is to transition to an off-market model. And that's to find properties that aren't listed retail, where we're going direct to seller, whether it be through a land broker or, someone that we have a prior relationship with that's in the industry. It comes to us and say, hey, this person is interested in selling, and we just deal direct. And oftentimes we're able to find, great win-wins for both us as Habitat and the sellers, And then in addition to that, we're constantly looking at tax foreclosures for Charlotte Mecklenburg, and are very active in that market as well, which we've seen a strong uptick in competition. I say competition, but just a lot of folks that are trying to navigate that arena as well and find properties through that avenue. So one of the things we've also seen is the increase in development costs, right? So I think from 2018 to 2019, just in our water and sewer tap fees, the city of Charlotte increased those prices by about 45%. So you can see how that would directly impact what it costs to develop a lot, and then multiply that out by how many unit numbers you do in some of your larger developments. So these are significant numbers, and some additional challenges that we've had to try to overcome and adapt our model. What our historic model has been, which has been primarily single family detached homes. And so we've made a conscientious effort to try to incorporate more multifamily opportunities into our portfolio, right? So this allows us to mitigate some of those costs by spreading them out over multiple units. And if we can get land at an affordable price, and then we can spread out the development costs through a higher density, then that allows us on a per unit basis to bring those costs down internally. So what we've seen is over the past, I can speak for the year and a half that I've been with Habitat, the multifamily proposed inventory now makes up about 45% of our total inventory. So you can see there's a strong trend in that direction, and over the coming 4 to 5 years, we have intentionally decided to incrementally increase the number of multifamily opportunities that we're putting into the new construction hat year over year. So, and then we've got some developments that we are going to be on ramping into in probably year 4, year 5 of our proposed plan that are significant numbers of townhomes. So that's what you kind of see on the horizon. The other thing that we're doing is developing larger tracts of land. Typically, we have to go out further from Center City to do that and find those parcels that aren't cost prohibitive, and that we can get enough units out of to justify the development cost. Additionally, we're looking at creative solutions with the city and the county. Excess land that may be in their inventory, we're having conversations. We're looking at different ideas and solutions where maybe we can incorporate affordable housing into some of their existing parcels of ownership, and whether that be through property that is owned by Charlotte Mecklenburg School System, or excess land that they've acquired for different infrastructure development projects, things of that sort. So those are ongoing conversations. So we appreciate the fact that they've been, willing to step in this arena with us and be a part of the solution of affordable housing in Charlotte. And then, to kind of piggyback on that, they have decided to partner with Habitat. The city of Charlotte has decided to partner with Habitat on identifying, acquiring, and rehabbing existing affordable housing inventory in Charlotte. They've really put an emphasis on this, and they've partnered with us and one other contractor to go out and identify these existing homes that we want to preserve for affordable housing in key neighborhoods in the Charlotte area. So that's an area that we're going to be emphasizing this year and hopefully in the coming years. And then also too, we're still seeing some in-kind donations through relationships that we have and folks that want to support the Habitat vision and are part of our broader family. So we are still seeing that. That kind of gives you an idea of high level. This is our strategy. This is where we're trending. Obviously, there are some challenges, but I think that we are adapting well, and we've got a great team that feels strongly is able to, execute on some of these items and continue to take us forward into the near future, and then hopefully the midterm as well. So that's kind of a snapshot of where we are. I guess at this time, I'll throw it back to Hunter, and next up will be Bob Glusenkamp. Thank you, guys.
So thanks, Chris. I'm going to take a few minutes and just talk a little bit about some of the numbers. As Chris talked about, where we're headed, some of the strategy and that kind of thing. I wanted to talk a little bit about production goals and so forth. But before we begin that, I really wanted to recognize our volunteers. When the pandemic hit, and this was, I guess, about mid-March, we stopped utilizing volunteers on all of our build sites, both on new construction, existing homes, and critical home repair. So what we did, Chris emphasized flexibility, and one of the things that we did at that point in time, we have about 20 full-time construction staff at Habitat. We also utilize 10 AmeriCorps. So we have about 30 people to draw from. So we took those 30 construction folks and we created what we would call 5 super teams. So we made the decision to keep building during the pandemic. And I really want to recognize Laura and the senior staff for making that decision. A lot of affiliates throughout the country decided not to proceed with construction, but the Charlotte region affiliate decided to proceed with new home construction. So we took those 30 folks, made 5 super teams, and I'm really proud of our family services and our construction folks. Laura says that 14's the magic number. So since the pandemic hit, the construction teams have completed 13 homes, and 13 families have been able to move into their new home. The 14th home will be completed later in June, and that will close, and that family will move in later in the month of June. So, it's interesting to me that North Carolina uses the slogan, safer at home. Well, that only applies if you have a home to go to be safe in the first place. So I'm really proud of Habitat Charlotte region for continuing to build and continuing to create homes for family to be safer at home in. So the question is about volunteers. Rachel Eldridge, who heads up our volunteers for construction, restores, and so forth, has created a lot of team calls, conference calls with our volunteers, and to say that they're anxious to come back is literally the understatement of the year. They can't wait to come back, and we can't wait to have them come back. So in July, the plan is to kind of utilize what we would call regular volunteers. And so what does that mean? So warehouse crews, some framing crews, especially like the warehouse crews where we have volunteers that come in every Tuesday or Thursday, and they create framing components for new homes or window components or play structures. We'll start utilizing those folks in July. The folks that are assigned to new home construction, they'll be assigned to a regular site supervisor, and that's to help with social distancing and so forth. So we want to create and keep a safe environment for our staff, for the homeowners, as well as for the volunteers. But the lack of volunteers, as Chris pointed out, land costs, development costs, those are all driving the cost of construction. So is the lack of volunteers. That means that from a construction standpoint, we have to subcontract more and more work. And so that helps to drive up the cost of single-family homes in particular, the more and more that we have to subcontract. So again, to help lower the cost of those homes, we can't wait for the volunteers to come back to us. Some production goals. I want to take just a minute or two to talk about that. Our production goals for fiscal year 21, and fiscal year for us starts July 1st. The production goals for new homes is 46, and that's up from 39 last year. So that's about an 18% growth. 32 are planned single-family homes. 14 are townhomes. And as Chris talked about, that's really important when we talk about the land costs and the appreciation of what land is costing us. So we will have 3 major construction projects for townhomes, 2 fourplexes and a 6plex to create those 14 townhomes. So that's about 30% of the inventory that we'll create in fiscal year 21. Those townhomes will be off Frew Road, Central Avenue, and Allen Road. So that's really exciting to have an 18% growth as we're coming out of this pandemic. Existing homes or recycled homes, we're really excited, as Chris talked about, to partner with the City of Charlotte. We plan to recycle or flip or whatever you want to call it, 24 homes in the next fiscal year. So that means that we would buy a home, as Chris talked about, maybe put in $20,000 to $30,000 worth of improvements, and then list those on the open market. So again, to help the affordable housing shortage throughout Charlotte. So we're very proud of that new partnership. Critical home repair, that paused as well in March when the pandemic hit. And so we were on track to complete about 120 critical repairs in fiscal year 20, a huge development. As I said, we were on track for that, but we immediately had to pause in March. So we will finish the year at about 81 critical home repairs. And this is scopes from new roofs to HVAC systems, electrical panels, flooring, etc., to create affordable homes where people can age in them, stay in them throughout their lifespan. Next year, we're proud to announce that we have planned and budgeted for 126 critical repairs. So that's a growth over the completed home repairs of about 55%. We did reinitiate the critical home repair program on May 26th. So the day after Memorial Day, we came back and we took some of the folks from the new home construction super teams and started putting those into the critical home repair. We hope to be back to full strength about July 1st, the beginning of the new fiscal year, and we will complete, about 10 to 11 critical home repairs per month throughout the fiscal year. So again, we're really proud that we're still building in the midst of this virus, this pandemic. And we're still serving families. Families are still moving in, and we continue to build. And so from here, we plan to get stronger and more construction. So I think that Alex hopefully has some questions for us at this point.
Alex, you might need to unmute your microphone there.
So glad I was talking to myself. So we do have a few questions, but just a reminder, you can ask questions. There should be a Q&A bar over to the side. So feel free to type in your questions and we'll work our way through them. So I have one here that asks, what is the best way to begin creating inventory of multifamily units?
The best way. Well, I'll say that I think we've been doing a fairly good job as far as acquiring, land that would lend itself to those opportunities. Then it I think becomes an internal navigation of what does it look like to employ volunteers on these projects. What sort of ratio would we like to see from a subcontracting standpoint to, there again, using volunteers. So we've got the opportunities. Another piece in there is also just going through the engineering process and plan review process. So those requirements are increasing. The city of Charlotte is constantly retooling the ordinances. And they're also, anytime they can get developers to pay for infrastructure rather than the city of Charlotte pay for it, sounds like a great idea. So there is that. So I think we're getting the opportunities right now. We're actively working on, I think it's about 4 projects that we're looking to get through plan review, or we're in some facet of engineering or plan review on. So we've got the opportunities. And I know that we're working internally right now to, see what our system, our model is going to look like moving forward from a volunteer deployment standpoint.
So I should say, Alex, that we have our first townhome project. Currently, we just started construction on it. It's a 4-plex unit on Plaza Walk. And so literally we're just coming out of the ground with foundations as we speak. So, I talked about the future plans and what's in fiscal year 21, but we actually have started a 4-plex unit in the last month or so.
Awesome. Chris, I think we have another one for you. What is the process for acquiring properties through the right of first refusal option?
Yeah, so the right of first refusal is it's a clause basically that has been baked into our deed restrictions. So when a property conveys, and it's a property that Habitat, say it's a home that we've built, or a property that we acquired and rehab and then sold to a Habitat family, those deed restrictions then attach and convey with that property every time it exchanges hands, basically. And before closing, that clause kicks in and says, hey, this is a home that is to be preserved for affordable housing, and I think the usage period on that has changed over the years, but I think it's to the effect of something like 45 years or something. It's a lengthy time period now that we include in that deed restriction language. So what happens is when an owner goes to sell that property, we have the opportunity, once they have procured a written contract, so they've listed their property, someone says, I want to buy it, here's a contract, they've listed out their terms, what the purchase price is going to be, when they're going to close, all of that. So anyways, what happens is then we are either contacted by the agent, real estate agent, or closing attorney, and says, hey, we've got an offer, we see this right of first refusal clause in the deed restrictions on this that are attached to this property, and then we then have a 20-day period where we're able to look at the contract, look at the property, inspect it, see what our rehab costs are going to be, see what our all-in costs are going to be on that property, and then make a determination internally whether or not we want to exercise that right of first refusal, essentially, which gives us the ability to purchase that property back at those same terms per the contract, and then rehab it and sell it internally or on the open market again. So that right of first refusal essentially allows us to touch these properties multiple times throughout history and try to keep that inventory affordable for years on end. So I hope that answers the question.
Bob, I believe this one will be you.
Okay.
What is the average cost to build a home, and has that cost been affected greatly by COVID?
Great question. So historically, over the last 12 to 18 months, we would say that an average single family new home would be about $145,000. We are projecting moving into fiscal year 21 that there's going to be, flat to an increase, could be as much as $5,000. So the impacts of COVID specifically would mean kind of quarter by quarter how we construct that house. And what I mean by that, so in the first quarter, I said that, so this would be July, August, September. We won't have that many volunteers assisting us. So most of the construction will either be by staff or by subcontractors. And so we have to obviously pay those subcontractor costs where that may have been volunteer services previously. That could be roofing, siding, framing. And so we have to kind of leverage how much supervision goes into that house, how quickly we can build that house versus the subcontracting costs. So COVID means more and more subcontracting, which means some potentially higher costs. So upwards of potentially about $5,000.
You scroll through a few questions. Are all recycled homes sold to Habitat families?
Good question. So short answer is no, not all of them. So we have some internal mechanisms, and we also, through our partnership with the city, there are certain properties that we have determined internally will be sold on the open market. So that's not to say that a Habitat family wouldn't be eligible to purchase that property, but they would go about it through third-party financing, right? So, and that's a little adaptation in sort of our model, because historically, we were the lender on all of our homes. So now there's opportunities where, because there's such demand for affordable housing, not just from families that have gone through our Habitat program, but just across the board. In some of these neighborhoods, we are offering these open market opportunities, and these families that end up purchasing the property still go through our income verification process, and they still have to meet our internal criteria to purchase those homes, but they have, technically speaking, they have not gone through our HIP process, our homeowner process. So to answer that question, not all. I would say it's probably, the ratio is heading towards probably 50-50.
And Chris, wouldn't you say that kind of allows us to branch out into some other neighborhoods in Charlotte that we may not historically have been able to get into?
Yes, it does. One of the things that obviously comes into play is subsidy, right? Especially in some of these neighborhoods where we've seen a significant amount of appreciation. Let's take the Belmont community, for example, right, which is adjacent to Plaza Midwood in Center City. We have home inventory in that neighborhood from the 90s, right? And that neighborhood has since experienced tremendous appreciation and value. And we're seeing that the price point just for the land, in many cases where investors would want to come in and purchase those properties, just for the land, they're paying, in excess of $225,000. right? So now you're getting into values to where you have to start looking at the whole picture and say, okay, we want to make sure that these homes are affordable for the folks that are going through, our program internally. What can we feasibly achieve from a subsidy standpoint, that's sustainable. These are a lot of different balls that we have to juggle that factor in. But to answer Bob's question, yes, going open market allows us to look at these opportunities and say at Belmont and some other areas where those values are creeping up and up and up, and still capture some of that affordable housing inventory. So, and still keep it under that, hopefully that 250 threshold, 230 threshold, which is where you're seeing the market in Charlotte go. There's a lot of upward pressure in the market. So.
All right, I'm going to ask 2 more questions since we are going a little over, but hopefully they won't be super long. Does the $145,000 to build a house include the price of land acquisition as well?
It does, yeah. So I mean that was kind of an all-in number, and that's averaged across all the different floor plans, the sizes and so forth. So obviously those vary greatly. We also are trying to factor in what's the average cost of a townhome, and that varies greatly from what the land cost is versus how much of the townhome itself we subcontract versus volunteer labor, as Chris talked about. So there's lots of variables. So we're talking in really kind of large averages when we talk about that 145.
And sort of a follow-up to that is, what is the sale price to a homeowner of a freestanding home compared to a townhome?
That's a good one.
Yeah.
There's a lot of factors that go into that, honestly. One of which is location. That's honestly probably the biggest factor with a townhome, I would say, because to date, most of our townhome plans, I think, are the same or close to it, right? So then you're looking at what's the actual dirt value. That's the biggest change. Homes can vary tremendously by floor plan, finishes, obviously location. We are constantly looking at the market because neighborhoods are evolving rapidly right now in Charlotte. We have to go through and reevaluate our internal valuations very regularly. We've increased the frequency at which we do it too. So, we have homes that have 5 bedrooms, and I think our current townhome unit has 3. You know what I mean? So there you can get some disparity there. So it's hard to really key in on exactly. A lot of it's going to be determined by where it's located, and what type of home we would be comparing it to. Is this a 5-bedroom home, 3-bedroom home? I would say, depending on where it's located, that the 3-bedroom townhome and the 3-bedroom single-family detached residence probably wouldn't be that far apart in cost per se. Our cost to build, and I'm just sort of spitballing here. And a lot of that has to do with what we purchased. We're able to purchase that actual land for. You know what I'm saying? So.
Chris, you might want to go. I want to go back to that 145 question. You want to talk a little bit about kind of the varying costs of what land and land development that we're seeing.
Yeah. So I mean, kind of the example I threw out earlier. Just in say like a Reed Park, right, which is where we have a pretty strong presence. Have historically, those property values have more than doubled in a year and a half. So depending on what type of property you get, if you get a single family lot that has a lower zoning classification, and we can only get one house on that property. All right, so we're going to pay $30,000 for the dirt. Then we have to put water and sewer taps on it, clearing, grading, foundation. You see where this is going, right? Those costs are mounting. Let's say we get a multifamily lot in that neighborhood, which are few and far between, but let's say we get one. Then say we're able to get anywhere from 4 to 8 units on a parcel that we purchase because the zoning allows for it. So we're able to spread out some of those costs. But then do they require, some sort of structured parking? Are they going to make us have to do, sidewalk, curb and gutter? These are all things that come into play. So, those costs year over year are continuing to increase. And so it's hard to capture just like a static number evaluation, so a lot of, kind of going back to what I was saying, you're really looking at location that's going to directly impact that cost. Your cost to build, I think you're going to have less variation in it. The biggest variation there is going to be whether or not you're using volunteers or subcontract labor, you know what I mean? Because we built the same plans. But your biggest variation is going to be, what did we purchase the property for? Where is it located? And how many units can we get on that parcel of land to split that cost over, over multiple properties? I hope that helps.
I think it does. I think that's all the questions that have popped up. If we've missed any, feel free. You can always message us on social medias and we will do our best to reply. You can always follow us on social media to be up to date on whatever we are doing. Also, I'm going to put a link in the chat so you can sign up for our newsletter. That newsletter will keep you up to date with all our events, as well as notify you for the next OLA event, which will be in July. Usually these are on the first Friday of the month, but next month, the first Friday is a holiday, so we will be having on the second Friday. Sorry to confuse your calendars. I can't control the holidays. But that is it. Thank you again to Bob and Chris, and thank you to filtersfats.com. And we hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. See ya.